Welcome to Beyond the Home Study. This is a podcast for parents, especially those who have children through or are exploring foster care and adoption. We are here to help you navigate the world beyond paperwork and placement. Thanks for being here. Laura, I will kick it over to you to introduce our wonderful guest we have today.
You guys, we have a great guest, and it's our last guest of the year. So, we haven't really mentioned this, but we are about to be taking a break for the end of the year. And so, we're really excited to have Johanna on for us today. She is a mom of three. She's going to tell you a little bit about her story. And she is also in Kentucky, but in a different part. She is in Murray, Kentucky. So, Johanna, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Johanna's in Kentucky, so I'm assuming she has similar weather, but Abby over here has like a really fleece blanket on. So I'm curious, are you just cold or is it really cold there?
It is like 35 and raining, like about to turn to snow in Northeast Ohio. We will probably have snow by Monday. And so just a couple days away. Yeah.
Not ready for that down here. Mm-mm.
Ready. I'm like, if it's gonna be like this, like let's just get the snow.
What is it
No,
like?
it's supposed to be 70 degrees here. I'm excited.
Oh, 70? No, that's too warm. I'm
Yeah.
like, ugh. It's been like rainy-ish today, like just overcast.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did
No
have,
fun.
good weather though before.
So good.
For the
Man,
rain
like,
hit. It's supposed to get cold next week.
yeah, it must be like a cold front coming in. I feel like we made it pretty far, at least where I'm at, like making it into November with like 60s, high 50s. Like, that's good. Now we can start, tapering down. We don't need to jump into snow right away, but, we'll take what we can get.
Johanna, do your kids like the snow?
They love the snow. I think they wish
Oh,
it snowed all winter long. I am not as much of a fan.
I've got like a love and a hate relationship with the snow. But why don't you tell me a little bit about your kids? How many we said you have 3 kids, but can you tell me just their story in terms of like adoption or not adopted?
So our oldest is Addie. She is 9 and she was adopted domestically as an infant. And then Mira is 6. She was our embryo adoption baby. And then Malachi is 4 and he was our surprise. So he's biological.
that's so awesome. I love it. I love that you've really touched like everyone who's listening will be able to relate to your story in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's a really cool part of this.
Yes, we have one of every type is what I tell people.
Well, wait, you need to adopt internationally though. Then you can
Then we'd
really
have
get
number
the
4.
whole.
I don't know if I can do number 4. Our house is crazy enough with 3. I don't know if I could handle.
Oh, that's so great. Well, tell us a little bit about what even led you to adoption in the first place. So take us back to when your oldest, before she even came into your family.
So, adoption was not our first plan by any stretch of the imagination. It wasn't on our radar at all. We married very young, so we waited a couple of years to try to have kids. And then when we did start trying, didn't happen. We dealt with infertility for several years. We went through pretty much all the treatments up to IVF, and we could get into that more if you wanted. We just didn't feel like IVF was the direction God was leading us to go. And we kind of took a hard pivot to adoption. That wasn't initially part of the plan at all. We worked with a local adoption agency out of Western Kentucky that's now closed, called All Blessings. They were wonderful. And we matched fairly quickly. We went, I guess our home study went active in like November and we matched, I think we matched in February with a little boy that was going to be due in July. And we got a call the week before his due date that the mother had decided to parent. And that was absolutely heartbreaking for us. We were not at all expecting that. We had this great open relationship with the birth parents. We were really kind of, um, well, I thought on the same page, and absolutely, as is her right to do, she decided she wanted to parent, and we didn't want to be mad at her about that, but it was heartbreaking for us because we had our heart set on this little boy. We had everything ready. We had a nursery. We had had baby showers. Everyone in our church family and our local family knew that we were adopting this baby. All of our friends and family knew, and then we had to tell everybody that no, this baby's not coming home with us. That we never met, but that in our heart was our son. And so that was really rough. We almost quit at that point. We were like, I don't know if I can do this again. And in November that same year, we matched with Addie's birth mom, and she came home with us in February the following year. And there was a lot of complication from point A to point B there, but she did come home with us finally, and then we finalized a few months later.
Man, when you talk about, like, that initial disruption and, we've had several people on that have had disruptions, I don't know that I've ever thought about it like this, but it almost sounds like someone who miscarried, like, just
Absolutely.
that, like, you're expecting and then it's the loss, but then you have this whole other complicated part where, in some ways, this is beautiful that this birth mom has decided to parent. I just, like, can't even imagine, like, the conflict of emotions there.
It was so hard because we were um, so expectant, and we, like you said, kind of almost like, I don't want to take away from people that have dealt with a miscarriage because it's not exactly the same, but um, you know, it it was so hard. This child was a child of our heart. We expected to have this child. We prepared for this child. We prayed for this child. And then she decided to parent, and we were in a way happy for her because she had a lot of family support, which not all of our birth moms, necessarily have, or bio moms have. And so it was wonderful that she had that family support. And I do think that's probably what made it possible for her to change her mind and decide to parent. But it was, we'd also had this relationship with her and with um, her partner, and that, we had had contact with them, had been texting with them, and then that relationship just stopped. And so, you know, the loss of that friendship that was starting to develop too was another hard thing.
Yeah, that's it's so tough. I mean, we've heard a few different stories of disruptions, and there's no two stories that are the same, of course, just like in all of adoption and foster care and everything, but that heartbreak is definitely still there. No matter what the circumstances, there's still heartbreak involved.
What made you want to continue to pursue?
So, as much as it kind of pains me to say it, we were desperate to have a child, and we knew that biologically, the doctors had told us when we went to talk to them about IVF and then changed our mind, that we had like a 95% chance of achieving a pregnancy within 3 IVF transfers. Those are very expensive if you've ever looked at that. Uh, and we didn't feel good about the particular doctor that we met with. Just had a very cavalier attitude toward the embryos and kind of the whole process. And we just didn't feel right about it. We didn't feel like God wanted us to do that. And so we really wanted to be parents, and we really wanted to have children. And so we said, well, God's not going to let it happen any other way. So we might as well just keep going. And that doesn't sound particularly full of faith or particularly confident, but that's kind of what we did. We just kind of belly flopped into it.
I kinda like that though, just, like, throwing yourself at it, see what happens, because there
Pretty
is
much.
that. Yeah, and there is that desperation. I mean, especially if you come to adoption from a place of infertility, you are there's a desperation that I think is really different, and, um, yeah, it doesn't seem full of faith all the time, but ultimately, God had a plan for your family. Yeah, yeah, he had a
Yes, he
plan,
did. And it
so
was beautiful, and it's still beautiful.
thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Home Study. If you've been enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could take a quick moment to leave a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. These are the best ways to help more families find these conversations and join our community. For sure. Yeah. So you adopted first through a domestic infant adoption. And then how did you move into embryo adoption? What did that journey look like?
Okay, so I mentioned there was a lot of steps between matching with Addie's birth family and then bringing her home. We actually had a second disruption with Addie. Walked through a lot of tough stuff with her biological family, and we had her for 24 hours. We had told no one, by the way. So we kept the second adoption completely separate. We told no one. We didn't tell our church. We didn't tell our family outside of our parents and our siblings. We told no one. So we had Addie for 24 hours, and everything was looking great. And then bio mom received some news that was kind of tough, and she said, I changed my mind. Kicked us out of the hospital. We had just sent out the messages to tell all of our friends and family, hey, surprise, we have a baby. Oh, never mind, we don't. And so that was unbelievably traumatic. I mean, you can imagine the trauma of the disruption from before. And then the second round, we have her for 24 hours, and then they take her back. And so I did not think that emotionally I could handle that again. I was not in a great space. There was a lot of it. I don't know how you can have postpartum anxiety when you didn't give birth, but you absolutely can. There was a lot of trauma associated with that. And so when we started talking about having another child, I said, I want to adopt, but I don't know that I can do it again. I can't go through another loss like that. And so we decided to talk about IVF again. And our friend is actually our general practitioner. And so I was talking to him one day and he's like, I had this nurse that just had twins through IVF. I'm gonna put you in contact with her. I said, okay. So she calls and we start talking and she said, well, he did he tell you our babies are snowflake babies? And I said, what's that? And so they were embryo adoption babies. And so I said, oh, I like this. And so we started talking to the doctors and we started going through all the things. And we had male and female factor infertility. We both had infertility, but I couldn't get pregnant, but I could carry. And so they said, well, hey, you're a great candidate for this. I passed all the tests with flying colors. And so we went through the match process. We ended up, we went through the National Embryo Donation Center in Knoxville and we matched with 3 different families. You had to have a certain number of embryos available for transfer. And so for us, that ended up being 3 different families. And the embryo that it turned out to be Mira was a set of 3 from a family that lived in another state that actually meant to be anonymous. They got stuck in the wrong pile. And we have an open relationship with them. We email back and forth every year, a couple of times a year. It's kind of like a Christmas card that from a friend from college that you kind of just never really get to see and you catch up on your family. So we went through that process and it went seamlessly. We took on the first transfer. Without any complications whatsoever. And it's been an amazing, amazing process and a very different process than a sick adoption.
That is very different.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. That's so interesting about the um anonymous, like the anonymous pile, and then that you get in touch and just talk with your we call our sons genetic parents is kind of what we say. So I don't know if you all have a term for it yet, but
We say bio family just to try
yeah.
to keep it as similar as we can to
Mm.
Addie's. So we just say both
Yeah.
bio families and try to keep that as consistent as possible. It's also very hard to explain to a 6-year-old that she's adopted. I mean, she's always known it's something we've always talked about, but now she's getting old enough to ask harder questions. The science doesn't quite make sense to her yet. So that's kind of a fun conversation.
Yeah, that you're
Yeah.
headed there, Abby.
I know. I've thought about that because it's very different when you just have an embryo adopted baby and like the way that you're talking about things. And now we have our twins that we adopted. And I just know that there'll be questions of, well, I was in your belly, but they weren't in your belly. So how did that work? I mean, all kinds of things. I know it's coming. I'm bracing.
Yes. We get it especially from the oldest. Now, she's getting old enough, she understands a little better, but okay, so I was adopted, but I wasn't in your belly. Right. But Mira's adopted, but she was in your belly. Right. It's
And
very
then
hard to explain.
Malachi was also in your belly, but he's not
Yes.
adopted.
Then how did he get there? We get that question a lot. Oh, we're not ready to answer this yet. But
So, yeah, then
So,
what happened after that? Like, you go through embryo adoption. Do you plan to continue transferring because you have 2 more embryos, I'm assuming? What happens there?
so we were done. We were done. I was done, done, done. I was a terrible pregnant person. I'd hated every minute of being pregnant. I'm thrilled to death that I had my daughter and our son later, but I was a horrible pregnant person. I did not do well. I had gestational diabetes. I had all these things. Like it was not fun. And so Mira was 18 months old. It was COVID. We had kind of accidentally sold our house. That's a whole other story. We had bought a camper and moved into my parents' yard in the camper while we were looking for property to buy. And it's October, and we're sitting on the back deck at my parents', and we get a letter from the NEDC that says, hey, you have these remaining embryos. If you want to do another transfer, you just need to let us know. Or if not, you need to put them back into like the pool to be adopted. And I can remember sitting on the deck talking to my husband, and I said, you know what? I'm a terrible pregnant person. We have 2 beautiful daughters. I'm happy. I'm done. If God wants us to have another one, he's just gonna have to make it happen the old fashioned way because I'm not doing it. I got pregnant the next month. Didn't know it. Had no idea because it wasn't on my radar. Um, Addie, who was 4 at the time, kept coming up and kissing my belly, saying, "There's a baby in your belly." And I said, "Addie, that is rude. Don't do that. Like, you're calling me fat. Don't do that." And then some other things happened, and I started to count, and I went, "Oh, no." It turned out I was pregnant. Yep, sure was. And so he was born in August the next year.
Wow.
Man, that is wild.
Yes.
Seriously, so
Yes.
wild.
Very wild.
I love it though.
Did you also have a hard pregnancy with
Yes.
Malachi? Yeah, still didn't like
Yes.
being pregnant.
No, no. It was better because I wasn't so I'm really afraid of needles, and so, of course, with embryo transfer, there's lots of needles involved and lots of shots. So, at least I didn't have that any more than normal. I still had gestational diabetes again, and so all those things were fun, but it was not yeah, it was just bad. I'm not a good pregnant person.
Well, I'm assuming now your family is complete as much as you are in control of that you are.
I wouldn't say anything else because last time I ended up with a surprise. So, as far as we're planning, yes, we're good.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I love getting to hear different stories like that and just how God works in crazy ways and in ways that, yeah, you didn't plan any of that, but he knew it all along. So, I think it's sweet. We do wanna talk a little bit about, just what this all looked like for you and your husband and what it felt like to, go through all of this together. I'm assuming you had family nearby, community, support systems, all of that. So we'll dig into that a little bit because we'd love for listeners to just hear, yeah, how you persevered through this.
So I think the biggest thing is that we didn't do it alone. We did keep Addie kind of secret for the most part with that first disruption happening, but our church family was really a huge backbone to us, and we had a very supportive family too. So don't hear me say that they weren't supportive; they absolutely were. But when we got the phone call that our first adoption had fallen through, we had church members show up in our driveway about 30 minutes later. They sat on the couch and cried with us. That's all I did. I mean, that's all you could do. But having that support was huge for us. I don't know that we could have made it through to go on and go through adoption again if we hadn't had the support of that church family as we were walking through this to really come alongside us and say, "Hey, we're here. We know it's not okay. It's not okay, but we're here with you and we're going to cry with you." And support of our family. So, in the midst of all of that, my little sister and my husband's little sister both had babies. And so, naturally, without any trouble, of course. And so we were kind of walking this really tight rope of trying to be happy for them, but at the same time mourning what we felt like we were never going to have. Because when you're dealing with infertility and you're kind of working through this and trying to get through the adoption process, you feel like it's never going to happen. And you hear, "Oh, well, if you'll just do this, it's going to work."
Mhm.
Or if you just stop worrying about it, God's going to make it happen. Well, sometimes God doesn't say that that's the way it's going to go. His plans are different than ours. And that was the one thing I always hated to hear when we were walking through this was, "Well, God has a plan." Okay, yes, he does, but he's not telling me what it is, and it's not helping right now. That was that was kind of my response, which is not particularly nice, I know, but that's kind of what I was feeling at the time. Like, yes, he absolutely has a plan. And looking back, it's beautiful. And I'm so glad that he worked our story the way that he did and that I can share it. But when you're in it, it hurts. It's not fun. And so I think it would have been nice. And that's why I'm so glad you guys are doing the podcast to realize that there are other people's stories who look like ours that have walked through there before, and it's not all sunshine and roses, because a lot of the people that we had talked to as we were working up into adoption and kind of doing all the laying the groundwork stuff, I don't know, I think it was just us, but everybody we talked to was like, "Oh, it's good, and it went so smoothly, and we have all these beautiful open relationships and nothing went wrong," and ours didn't go that way. And so it's if you have that community around you or find that community that can tell you, "Hey, I've been there. It hurts. It's hard. We're going to be with you anyway." I think that is so important to help you get through all of that.
Yeah, I really love that you are speaking on this, and specifically about like the baby showers and the watching the other people, have kids that, they didn't have any issues. I am one of those that was told, which we didn't I always I always am hesitant to say fertility issues because we didn't really go that route to even know what was going on. But I do remember thinking, "Oh, I'll never have trouble getting pregnant because my mom and sister, you just look at them and they're pregnant." Like, whatever the things people tell you. And it is hard when you see other people, getting pregnant easily or even adopting easy. Even if you didn't have fertility issues and you are on the adoption train as plan A, and then you see someone else and they got matched immediately, and you're like, "What? We've been in this process for 2 years. We haven't got matched." So I love that you're talking about that because I do think that's such a real issue.
It is, and it's hard sometimes to talk about, and if we were in person, I'd probably be crying, so maybe it's easier because 'cause we're over the video. But but I think it's hard because it's such a deep emotional place, and it's something that not everybody can empathize or sympathize with, and so you have to really kinda look to find those people that have been through that, and that's one of the things I love about Hope That Binds. I know, we were talking about it a little bit before we started the recording. So they work to connect adoptive and foster families. They work with foster families too. And that's been a really great resource for me because we now have this moms group that's in adoptive trenches. And we actually kind of have a variety. We have an adopted mom that's oldest is like 18 or 19. And then we have a adopted mom that's still on the waiting and still waiting on the list and still trying to hope, praying for a match. And then you have those of us in between that have our kids at home with us. And so it's nice to be able to meet with that group of women. We meet about once a month and lift each other up and, kind of support the moms that are coming on and that are still in the waiting and say, "Hey, we've been there. It's going to happen." Right? Like, how can we pray for you? How can we help you? What can we do to support you while you wait?
I would love to just share a little bit more with our listeners about that group. Like anything you can share of how it started, how you found it, like how does a person go about finding a group of moms that have adopted?
Like everything else we've done with this whole process kind of by accident, we belly flopped into it. So Hope That Binds is based out of Cunningham, Kentucky, which is about as far west as you can get. And it was started by a pair of sisters, Brooke and Wendy. And Wendy actually, she and I went to college together, sort of. I was in class with her husband. And then she was a client of mine when I was in practice. I'm a veterinarian as well as a college professor. So anyway, we kind of connected that way. And then she and her sister both are big adoption advocates. And so they started this organization and their goal is to connect, support, and engage adoptive and foster families. And this is one of their outreach programs is to make connection groups for moms. They actually did a men's night the other night too. They did wing night. My husband went, had a big time. They do family camp, things that you can support adoptive and foster families and kind of put all those people together.
And is this just based in Kentucky, though?
As far as I know, all the groups are in Kentucky. I did meet a few people that had kind of branched out. We're down close to Tennessee too. We're on the Tennessee Illinois border. So there are a few families I think that kind of come from across the state line too. But it's mostly Kentucky. They are on Facebook and on.
That is really cool. Yeah, we've like brainstormed and kind of dreamed about like, okay, what does an in-person extension of this podcast look like one day? Or, just like different high hopes and dreams and things that we have, but nothing that we're ready to actually do as we raise our tiny humans. But things like that are just it's really encouraging to hear because I think we've talked about this before where community is wonderful online and like we can connect like this with people that we'll never probably meet in person, but there's also something really special about being there and like being face to face in person. So I'm thankful for groups like that and hope that there's other people who want to start those in other places too.
I think it's been a great resource for me, and I'm several years in. I mean, our oldest is 9, but it's still helpful, to compare parenting stories and things that are specific to adoptive moms that maybe not everybody gets to deal with. I mean, we deal with that trauma. Adoption trauma is a real thing, even when you adopt as a domestic infant. That's still there. And so being able to talk to other moms that are walking that or have walked that, whose kids are a little older, it's very helpful.
Yeah, speaking of that trauma piece, I specialize in trauma in my practice, but I also just hear from a lot of moms, even from, friends from this podcast. And one of the things that gets brought up to me a lot is, I don't know if I can bring a child into my home knowing that, and this is specifically for like foster care or like disruptions, knowing that they might leave and then I've created more trauma. Or, I had someone else mention the other day, I don't know if I could bring a child in my home. I know they're going to experience trauma even as a baby, and I don't know if I'm equipped. And, I have my professional response to that, but I am curious, what would be like, how would you encourage a mom? Just you have different experiences than me, and how would you encourage a mom with that question?
One thing that they say at church is that God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And so if he puts that desire in your heart, he's going to equip you to fulfill it. He's going to put those people around you to help support you. And even though the trauma is hard, even though we went through a lot of really horrible things trying to bring our oldest home for permanently, I would still do it again. It's still worth it to bring her home and make her part of our family. And, they talk about how if you look at adoption from the outside and you're like, oh, how wonderful for the child. Well, yes, yes, sure. But it's also wonderful for me because I've learned so much through the process and she's such a blessing to us. And by no means is she perfect. She's a 9-year-old girl. Twin girls, they're hard. Not a fun stage, no matter how they join your family. But, you know, I cannot imagine our lives without her in it. And if I had said, "You know what? I'm too scared. I don't wanna deal with it again," after we had that first disruption, I would look at all the things I would have missed. You know, persevere, stick with it. Like, God's going to hold you. He's going to be there. You just have to find it for the support.
Yeah, that's so good. Were there other, like, mantras or even, practices and things that you did kind of throughout the process that you look back on and you're like, "Ooh, yeah, that really helped get me through."
W Other things that maybe helped, finding something else, because your world becomes all-consuming with adoption and the adoption process, or even if you get into if you talk about the fertility stuff, the fertility treatments, find something else to do. Find a new hobby, find a new group that's totally unrelated, because it's very easy to let that overtake your life, and if you do, it's very hard to find that joy and to continue to be, a happy, adjusted person because you're so focused on all the things. So, take up a new hobby, find a new social group, do something else not related.
That's such great advice, and I actually don't think that that one comes up often enough. But it is good because you have to get out of your bubble for a minute. Like you can just be on like too many groups, and everybody's asking you, and you just are kind of like in it. And just like you had mentioned before, you're like, is it ever going to happen? Is it ever going to happen? Regardless if you're trying naturally or adoption, it just is all consuming. And so, learning something new is great, right? Because like that takes up so much of your brain. But I love that's such great advice. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
It's so true too because, like, I look back so we're at, like, I can look back a year ago today, a year ago this month, and we were in the throes of waiting for the twins to be born. So we were having, somewhat infrequent communication with their birth mom, trying to figure out how are we going to, like, keep fundraising to pay for these new expenses, all these different things. Like, this was the time last year. And we also didn't live in our house. We had moved and it was a whole thing. But I'm, like, looking at, around my house and I'm pulling out Thanksgiving decorations and Christmas decorations almost and things like that, and I'm like, "Wow, last year, like, I didn't even do any of this." Like, I was in such a fog of waiting that I didn't even enjoy this season the same last year, and it's really interesting because, yeah, I wish I would have had someone give me that advice to say, "Just keep doing the things, like, go do new things, go find those groups, like, this doesn't have to be what you're, you know, stuck on every single day." So, I think anyways, it's really good, and I'm reflecting on it even now.
Was there ever a time when you were, in the middle of all of this, trying to persevere that you thought, maybe this is God telling us to stop. Maybe this isn't in the cards and we need to find other ways to, be involved with children.
Yes. So we We never we never fully stopped the process. Like, we stopped all the fertility treatments once we made the pivot to adoption. When our first adoption fell through, we had that disruption and kind of in the between and the waiting, we're like, "Should we even just keep going? Should we do this?" Uh, and really, it kind of was out of our hand, not really out of our hands, but kind of out of our hands. Our book was still active with the agency, and, we actually had started talking about, well, do we need to work with a consultant group? Do we need to change to a different agency? What do we need to do? And had started kind of looking at that. And then we got the call that we had matched. And so, yes and no. We did try to focus on some other things. We took a couple of trips and did some things kind of in the middle that I'm really glad in hindsight that we did because they're hard to do now with children on board. Uh, but yeah, other ways that we were still interacting with children, we were really big and still are to an extent in kids ministry. So we helped run the kids ministry at our church for quite a while, kind of in that interim time. Uh, we were big in Awana programs and things like that. And so there's still lots of ways. We had lots of kids, friends that, were close. We babysat a lot, which was good and bad. It was good because we loved it and we loved being around the children. It was bad because then it was like, oh, but I want this. And then our friend's kid threw up all over our living room, and we're still like, "Really?" She's 16 now, which is crazy. So, you know, we tried, I think, kind of to put it in the back of our minds, but it's almost impossible to completely let it go.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Laura, because there's everyone gets to a point where they ask that question, I think, of like, will God ever answer? Or will it ever go the way that I think it may go? And everyone's answer is going to be different for that, but it's challenging nonetheless.
And then going back to the very beginning, just I mean to ask other people this because I'm always curious. What was your line of thought and reasoning behind pursuing domestic private adoption versus international or foster care or even embryo? Well, I guess you didn't know embryo at the time, but
We really didn't know anything about embryo adoption at the time. And so that just kind of wasn't even on our radar. We looked at international versus domestic, and we looked at things like how long the wait time was, and it looked like the wait time was actually less for international, at least at that time. I know some of the laws and rules have changed, and so that may be different, but at the time, it was actually shorter. But financially, we at the time could not handle the cost associated with an international adoption. Now I know that there are some grants available and some things, that we could do. For us, it really wasn't about bringing home an infant. That just seemed to be the easiest thing for us at the time. That's kind of what happened, but the international just was too cost limiting for us. Now I'm not sure that it really is any different cost-wise, but that was kind of the big thing there, and then we actually had said we would adopt, up to, like, 2 or 3 years old. They had a range on our agency paperwork, and it just so happened that we maybe
and then what about foster care? Did you guys consider that one?
we really didn't consider it at the time. We were still relatively young. We were in our mid-20s at the time, and so, um, we did not really feel totally equipped for foster care at that point in time. We actually did get foster care trained. We were foster care certified through our agency. That was one of their requirements as a domestic adoption. We've let it lapse, so we'd have to go back and redo it, and I think now that might be something we would reconsider in the future when our children are a little bit older. A couple of our kids, one of them in specifically, has some learning challenges and some different things, and that takes up a lot of our time and attention, and so we need to be able to focus on them, making sure they can get all the resources that they need. Our church right now is doing a big thing for foster care and a big push to try to support foster families, even if you can't be the foster family, to support the foster families that are in. And so trying to get involved with that a little bit and provide some support that direction from the other side of it.
Sure, yeah.
That's so great. I mean, because I know November, the month that we're in now, is National Adoption Month. And so there's a lot of talk about, foster care. And I feel like that's a good push from churches. Like we've talked about different things that some people at churches may say that's not super helpful about adoption. But I think the support foster families, and even if it's you not getting involved in foster care specifically, having children in your home. So I think that's like a really sweet way to support the other families that are around you. I hope that that is a successful thing in your church and other places too. It's really good.
Yeah, it is. I love that. And thanks for, answering that. I think it's important for our listeners to kind of hear the way that everybody goes through that like decision, do we go the foster care route? Do we go private? Do we go international? And I love to just hear like what went through your mind that made you go this way or that. And, there's obviously no wrong answer. And some people it's this one fell in our lap. And sometimes it's financial or sometimes it's I didn't even know about that. But
Yeah, and as far as the embryo adoption goes, that one, once our doctor friend put us in touch with the nurse and kinda told us about it, and we started researching it, and it was a really good way to still pursue adoption, but maybe cut out some of the trauma. Obviously, not every situation is gonna work out like ours did. We have a great relationship with our bio family, but that may not always be the case. But also from a financial standpoint, it was more affordable for us. It actually was less expensive to do the embryo adoption than it was to do the domestic adoption, and so as much as you don't wanna think about money when you're dealing with adoption, unfortunately, it is part of it. And so that worked out well for us.
yeah, that's good to know. Is that Abby, do you know is that still the case with embryo adoption, like in terms of cost? I've never looked into the financial part of that.
Yeah, I think that it really depends on what your infant or what your domestic adoption looks like. If it's, just with an attorney and it's someone that or more of like a kinship kind of adoption or something like that, those fees will look very different than something crossing state lines and involving multiple agencies and all of that. So that can look really different. An embryo adoption, I know that at least for us, the cost it was much lower. When we compared apples to apples with one agency specifically. Um, it was different, but then you have to add in all of the medical costs, and depending on what your insurance looks like, and some insurance is very friendly towards IVF and all of the drugs and things that you need, and some is not. And so you can rack up some medical bills through that. So I think there's so many factors on both sides that you'd have to almost do like a side by side comparison for you specifically to get to see the full picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. See, things you don't know that
Yeah.
you learn on this podcast. Well, Johanna, why don't you wrap us up a little bit by telling us, maybe one or two things that you feel like were just like what got you through, you even the pregnancy, even you're like both pregnancies, that you're like, oh man, these pregnancies suck. I'm happy for the baby, but this doesn't feel great. I was one of those too. I hated being pregnant. And it was an easy pregnancy. I still hated it. But yeah, what were one or two things that really, just helped you to, like, maybe, like, something that you were saying to yourself, either scripture or something that someone said to you that was encouraging?
It was definitely not God has a plan. It was not that. So, my favorite verse, and now everybody knows it, but it seems like when I found it, nobody knew it, is Philippians 4, 6, 7, and 8, and when it talks about be anxious for nothing, that was a big deal for me, was to realize that I could cast all my cares on God and that He would take them and He would carry that burden. And so, um, that was a big thing. And then outside of that, really just the support of family, friends, that church community, and then what I wish that I had had then that I have now is this adoption mom community. I wish I had known that that existed or that it really did exist. I don't know that it did back then because that was a big deal. And then, as strange as it sounds, with Malachi, with our surprise, we actually lost my mom. It's about 16 weeks with him, and so the fact that I was pregnant is kind of what kept me going in the middle of that loss, and so kind of came full circle. This desperation to be pregnant and to have children, and that was our focus. And then going through the adoption and going through the embryo adoption and becoming surprisingly pregnant with Malachi and then losing mom, and then having that baby to live for and those other children to live for to keep myself going when I was so sad other than my mom. So it kind of all came in a big circle. really.
Yeah, that is helpful and encouraging, and there's been many times when I think that we've seen and Abby, even your story with the twins, life and death going hand in hand, and, um, yeah, I think that's really helpful too to think about, casting our anxieties on the Lord. Well, this is your call, all you listeners out there, to start your own support groups. Then, if you don't have one and you're not in Kentucky, maybe you should start one because it may be a few years before Abby and I do anything. Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, and I'm gonna remember, Johanna, when I think back on this interview, I'm going to remember you talking about the belly flopping into all the different things, like, it really I think especially now as a mom, that is just, like, a very relatable you just kind of fall into things, so I that's the picture that I have as we leave.
Maybe that should be the title of this episode.
I love it. I love it.
Belly
Belly
flopping
flop.
through life.
We might have to work that in. We might have to work that in.
I
I
like it.
love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And you guys, if anything we have said today or Johanna has said today has made you laugh, cry, or feel seen, please share this episode with a friend so we can support other adoptive parents or prospective adoptive parents. And we will see you guys again next week for our final episode of the season. So don't miss it. It's going to be great. And yeah, talk soon.